But what you realize, the more time you spend on the mat, you realize that almost all of your self-defense needs can be solved with just control. Maybe if you're fighting somebody who outweighs you by 50 pounds and is very explosive, there is benefit to having a technique that you can, snap somebody's arm or render them unconscious. But in most cases, you're not fighting somebody who's 120 pounds heavier and is crazy. You're fighting an average person, and you're an average person more or less in terms of height and weight. So they're pretty similar size, and he doesn't need any arm bars. He doesn't need to inflict any pain and hurt this man. He can simply hold him down. Like the position, the control is the submission.
Right.
Whereas if he didn't know how to control this person, if he didn't have these same control tactics, he might have to, use strikes to kind of show his dominance and to maintain some kind of control or respect. And that's something that I hear often. People say things like, yeah, I'm a lover, not a fighter. Now, someone who's a true lover, not a fighter, who doesn't want to learn anything about fighting, if they get into a fight and they're in the fear for their lives, they're going to have to resort to punches to protect themselves because they don't have anything else. Punching or like eye gouging or attacking the person's neck. These are just very natural things that people do when they're in fight or flight.
Or they go to the gun. I can tell you most of the legal cases I work on are normal law-abiding people. They've never been in trouble with the law a day in their lives, but they have a concealed carry permit. They carry a gun around and they get scared. They get scared by a genuine threat, but it's not a deadly force threat. The law divides force into the use of force law divides force into two buckets, non-deadly force and deadly force. And you're only allowed to use deadly force in self-defense if you're facing a deadly force threat. But what happens is people get scared by a non-deadly force threat, a shove, something like that. But the only tool they have in their self-defense toolbox is that gun. And when they get scared, they go to the gun. And then they get charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, which is a felony good for 20 years in prison.
Now, if somebody shoves you, that is 10, 15 years younger, let's say you're 50 years old, right? And they're 32 years old, 35, and they shove you and they outweigh you and there's no other people around and you're in some back of a building, back parking lot alley, and they shove you, you might miss the opportunity. Drawing your weapon in many ways could be your way of saying, stay away.
Right.
And then the person approaches you and now you're firing at someone who's simply, angry, and they're deciding to walk towards you. So it's almost like it's very easy to feel like your life is threatened when you know very little about how to behave in a physical altercation. And that's what you're saying, right? They jump too quickly to pull the gun out because they feel like their life is threatened. And in many cases, in some cases, it could actually be threatened. The person might shove them once and then walk towards them, shove them again, punch them in the face, and now they're getting punched, into the concrete. So who's to say that it would not have escalated if they didn't pull out their firearm? I don't even know. That's
right. But there has to be, to justify going to the gun, there has to be evidence from which a reasonable person could infer it might escalate. You can't just speculate or imagine that for all I know, this could have gotten worse. There has to be a reason. There has to be facts like you talked about. Hey, that guy outweighed me by 50 pounds. He's 30 years younger than me. There was no way for me to run to. There was no way for me to get help. All of that would be facts that a reasonable person could use to justify going to the gun. But you would need those kinds of facts. And frankly, if you can defend yourself, I always tell people, because most of my community are gun owners. They carry guns. Just like I carry a gun for personal protection. I have every day of my adult life. But the truth is, if you have to go to the gun, that just became the worst day of your life. If you have to kill someone, that's the worst day of your life. And it's bad for you to have to use deadly force in self-defense, because not only are the risks increased now in terms of a physical fight, now it's a deadly force fight for sure, because there's a gun involved. Even if your gun is the only one in the fight, there's a gun in the fight. Anybody can get control of that gun. But if you actually have to shoot someone or kill them, now the potential legal consequences you're facing are not just an assault charge, but a murder charge, manslaughter charge. And you're looking at possibly spending the rest of your life in prison without possibility of early release. And I tell my audience all the time, folks, I don't care how innocent you actually are, how justified you actually may have been, because you have to keep in mind, no one evaluating your use of force after the fact, the police, the prosecutor, a jury, a judge, none of those people were there when it happened. Nobody knows what actually happened. They're hearing stories about what happened, your story, your defense lawyer's story, the prosecutor's story, witness's story, but none of the people deciding your fate know what actually happened. So they have to make an inference about what happened based on the evidence, based on the law. And because of that, there's noise, there's uncertainty in the legal system. We don't have a perfect legal system that arrives at justice with a capital J every time. If I have to put you in front of a jury, I don't care how innocent you actually are, there's a 10% chance you get convicted. And if you've killed someone, that 10% chance you get convicted is life in a cage forever. And you don't want to run that legal risk, much less the physical risk, if you have the tools at your disposal, like BJJ, to be able to solve that threat. You have to win the physical fight. If you don't win the physical fight, everything else becomes rather moot. But to win the physical fight in a way that's not only tactically sound, but legally sound as well. So you're not making yourself unnecessarily vulnerable to either injury or spending the rest of your life in a cage.
Yeah, you said if you have to grab the gun, it became the worst day of your life. That's a very important statement. And I've always wanted to get a concealed carry license. It's on my mind for the last couple of years. But a part of me is just pushing further and further from that, because I don't think I need it in most cases. My threshold, my ability to wait is so much greater than most. I can solve most problems with my hands. But looking at Idris right here, this is not the worst day of his life.
No. This is every day almost.
Yeah, and he's not losing any sleep, having had to control this man in this way, because using a firearm and taking someone's life can really, can sit with you. I don't know anybody who's taken someone's life in self-defense, a citizen. I'm sure you have met people and you've worked with them and you've trained with them, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't rest easy. Right? Even though you were defending yourself, you still took someone's life. That's a very hard thing to do. But to control someone like this, I can do this every day of the week. I can control, my neighbor's grandmother like this and not feel guilty and feel justified. She was trying to scratch my eyes out. And I just took her to the ground and I controlled her. She has no bumps, no bruises. I didn't punch her. I just held her down for 5 minutes or for 2 minutes. And when she calmed down and her daughter showed up, I released her. And that was the end of the fight. And I don't feel guilty for controlling a grandmother.
Yeah. And that's another thing too, folks. So so say the police are called and say this other party wants to try to press charges against you for having used jiu-jitsu on them. There's going to be a police report. That police report goes to the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor is looking at that report. And he doesn't know, the prosecutor knows nothing about jiu-jitsu, knows nothing about any of this. But what he does know is if he wants to take this to a trial, he has to develop a story, a narrative of your excessive use of force, something that he can sell to a jury to try to get a conviction in this case. And if there's a lot of injuries, if there's blood, if there's video of mayhem happening, well, that's something he can try to sell to a jury as an excessive use of force. When the fight is over, and there's not even a bruise on anybody, that prosecutor's never going to take that case to trial. There's not going to be any charges. There's nothing for him to build a story around.
I love it.